Hey, this is Adam from Fabspeed Motorsports. Today we're going to do the install on the Maserati Levante Sport Cats. First step, we're going to remove this aluminum splash pan. We're going to start out with these two 10mm bolts up front. And then these four 10mm bolts on the outsides. All right, once you remove those 10mm, you're going to grab your pick tool and come out to the sides. There's an aluminum or a plastic Christmas tree clip. We're going to pry both of them out, and we'll do the same on the other side. Next, we're going to remove these two 13s from the tray. And we're going to go and remove these 16mm bolts. These might be a little tight. There's two on each side. Last but not least, we're going to remove these front two 18mm. Now when you're removing this last bolt, you're going to want to hold onto the tray because it could fall down a little bit. All right. Now with both hands on the tray, push a little bit forward. You'll remove these tabs from the plastic, and then these side sections of plastic are going to come down a little bit, and you're going to remove the tray. Just be careful not to push the plastic too hard and crack it. We're going to put this off to the side, and now we can start on the cats. So the first thing we're going to do to remove these cats is loosen up the exhaust and try and drop it and pull it a little bit back so that we have enough room to pull these flanges out. We're going to start pulling these pinch bolts out. And then we're going to move on to these two 13mm. Now we're going to go to the 13mm nuts in the back. We're going to start with this back one up here. You might have to move the exhaust out a little bit of the way. We'll start moving back to these two in the back. We'll do the same on the other side. So our next step is to try and push this exhaust as far back to the back of the car as possible. Sometimes you may need a rubber mallet for a little bit of persuasion. A helpful hint is to spray these areas with PB Blaster and try and loosen it up a little bit. So let's try this. It's moving a little. So it's starting to move. You may need to wiggle up and down, try and get them to move a little bit more. We'll do it on both sides. All right, so now it's moving a little bit, so you can try and start unbolting the cat a little bit more. We're going to start with these two bolts right here. So we're going to use our 17mm socket. start removing these guys. So our next step, we're going to want to try and remove these oxygen sensors. Right now all I have is a 22mm wrench, but optimally you'd use an oxygen sensor wrench or an oxygen sensor socket. So right now we can get to it with a wrench, luckily. I'm going to spin it out by hand. And kind of tuck it up out of the way. And attack the one up top, the pre-cap. This one you might not be able to see very well. This would be much easier with a socket and an extension. Not loose yet. All right, now that that's out, we're good. Now we're going to attack the V-band clamp. It's a 10mm socket. Okay, next step is to attack that 10mm socket for the V-band, or 10mm bolt for the V-band clamp. We got lucky, it looks like the cat let loose. So if you're not fortunate enough to have the V-band let go right away, you might need to give it a little persuasion and crank it loose a little bit. So what you're going to want to do is move that over a little bit and try and wedge the socket. It might be a little hard for you to see, but wedge the edge of the tool in between the V-band clamp and the flange and twist the socket a little bit, or twist the tool a little bit. That might pop it loose. Sometimes you need to hit it with a hammer and give it a little bit of impact force on the back here, and that'll pop it loose. After you get the V-band clamp loose, you're going to want to pull it back. There's a metal flange or a metal gasket in between. You want to make sure that you get that because it's very small and it does kind of get lost. So once you pull the V-band back a little bit, you can kind of move the exhaust, and you want to just make sure that everything comes loose. And you can actually let the V-band clamp slide down the down tubes a little bit. Let's see. Well, be careful with that crush ring, because it is a little delicate. And you can see why it's important to kind of be a little delicate with it. And it's springy, so it goes places you'll never find it. Just put that there for later. Now we're going to want to do all the same procedures on the right side, or left side, and then we'll come back to that. So now that we have the cat loosened, we're going to want to take care of this ground strap. It's going to be a 13mm bolt. Just going to come in through here. Pull it off to the side. For safekeeping, you can put the nut, just since there's other bolt holes over here, just thread that bolt right back in a little bit. Okay. So now we're ready to try and yank everything out. So you can pull it down past that mounting bracket and you can push up and down. You might need a partner to help hold the back section of the exhaust. Be careful because the tips do touch the back of the bumper. So right now it's loose enough that we can try and wiggle it up and down, try and work it out, spray more PB Blaster. I think we'll be able to break it loose and bring it down. So the left side cat's out, and now we're going to try and do the same for the right side. So we already have those brackets out. Let's kind of crank it up and down. There we go. You're going to want to keep your V-band clamps. All right, so there we go. Let's get the new ones in. So now that we have the cats out, our next step is to protect this heater hose up here. There's already some protection on it, but with the new cat, we want to make sure that it's not going to have any heat transfer. So we have this foil-backed fiberglass insulation. What we're going to want to do is kind of wrap it around like that. Put 2 little pinches in it because we want to wrap it up like that, and we're just going to kind of pre-form it a little bit before we get it up there. And then we've got these stainless steel tie wraps that will wrap it up in there. Try and wrap it around there pretty tight before we put the tie wraps on. It kind of holds itself in place on its own. These tie wraps are kind of like a zip tie. You put it in through there, and once it comes out, it can't really pull back through. So pull it tight. Don't kill it, just tighten it. Then we'll loop the second one around. Okay, and while you're here, you might as well take the time to take a pair of wire snips or metal snips and just snip the tails off of them. So now that we have everything tucked in place, we're going to take our side cutters and trim those tails. Be careful not to get anything else in there like the oxygen sensors. Okay, so now to put our new cat in, we're going to put our V-band clamp on, orient our seal correctly. It's got these 3 little prongs on there to make sure that it's centered. Again, we're going to be careful with that and try and hold it in place while we put it up in there. And now you might want to take a little bit of spray lube and put it on there. Ours is already a little lubricated. And we're going to try and stuff it up here. We're not really going to go and get the V-band on right away. We just want to push it up a little higher so that we can get this tail side in place, and we'll kind of slide it back down. I guess you can put the ring in afterwards. That makes it a little easier. Now that it's in there, we'll kind of slide it up, making sure that that ring is in place again still, and mate the 2 surfaces of the flanges. And now it's up in there right. You might have to push this up a little bit until you get it into place. And we're going to take our V-band and slip it over. I'm going to switch hands.
Hold. Give me a second. All right, go for it.
Okay, so now got the V-band clamp in place. We need to get our 10mm socket. A swivel helps. We can come up from the side. And we're just going to tighten it a little bit, and then we'll reorient it. And right now we don't really want to slam it into place, but we want to tighten it enough that it's not going to take those two mating faces away from each other. Now we've got this V-band clamp hand tight, we can rotate it a little bit to line up these bolt holes for the mounts and leave this loose so that once we get the other side in, we'll be able to slide this forward. So repeat the same steps for this side as the opposite side. So now that we've got the left side cat in, we're going to mount the brackets. So right here, we're going to use the supplied hardware. So you're going to go nut or bolt, washer, then washer, and locking copper nut. You might as well put in both sides. And we're going to snug these. We're not going to tighten them quite yet. The reason we're not going to tighten them is because we want everything to be in place when we tighten that V-band clamp, and then we're going to tighten this, and then we're going to tighten this clamp here so that everything will be in the right place when it's all mounted back together. Now that we've gotten the left side cat snugged, let's work on the right side. You're going to take these two nuts and line up these bolt holes. And these are rubber mounted, so you might have to wiggle it, get it into the right spot. One thing you might want to do is use your pole jack and pick your exhaust up a little bit. And now with the exhaust up, you can see our bolt holes line up much better. So we're going to take these. These are going to be a 16 millimeter. And again, we only want to snug them. We don't want to tighten them. Whoop. So now that our headers are snugged in place, we're going to want to lower our exhaust. So we're going to take the pole jack out a little bit, and we're going to focus on these two brackets first. So in our earlier part of the video, we pushed the exhaust back, so now we want to slide it forward until these line up, and then you're going to take these 13 millimeter bolts and slip them in. You may need to slide the exhaust back up a little more. We'll tighten those. These you can fully tighten. So now that the front's bolted in, we're going to want to come in and start bolting these mufflers in place. You might find it easier to use your pole jack and pick it up so that you can kind of get the bolts in place. Now that it's up there a little bit, you can line these up. If you want to get a shot in there, line these up onto the studs, and we'll put our nuts on. Again, we want to thread the nuts on a couple threads before we use our air tools or electric tools. And we'll repeat the same process on the other side. Now that all of them are threaded on a little bit, you can fully torque them and make sure that they're snug and tight. and repeat those steps on the other side. Now that our exhaust is taken care of, we're gonna come here and torque our V-band clamps the rest of the way. We want them to be tight, but we don't want to stretch that clamp too much and break it. And when I get close to the end, I like to switch from an air tool or an electric tool to a regular ratchet. That way we know we're not going too hard. Okay, so we'll do the same for the other side. So now that our V-band clamps are tight, our next step is to tighten these clamps. And these you want pretty tight. Now our next step, we're going to want to attack these brackets and make sure they're tight, and then we can go and work on the O2 sensors. So let's start off on this side, on the 13 millimeter nut and 13 millimeter bolt. So again, the final torque is always by hand. So now we're going to work on the O2 sensors. What we want to do is we want to take anti-seize, don't get a lot glopped on there. We really just want to go on a little bit of the threads. Do not get it down here. It can interfere with the sensor when it melts. So just a little bit of anti-seize, it doesn't take a whole lot. What we're going to do, we're going to pre-spin it backwards so that when we go and put it into our hole, or our oxygen bung, well, spun it backwards the wrong way. This way, when we go to tighten it, the wire's not bound and nothing is in a bad spot. So we're gonna hand tighten it and then come in with either, again, a 22 millimeter wrench, an oxygen sensor socket, or an oxygen sensor wrench. I might be able to get to it with just a wrench. If your wrench is kind of sitting on there a little too funny, I would stop and get another tool to better suit the job. Otherwise you risk damaging the side of the sensor. So now that we've got the oxygen sensor in place, you might be able to modify one of your tools if you don't have the oxygen sensor socket. You know, run that around there. And then you can crank on the socket and torque it down the rest of the way. Just be careful that you're not going to slip off. We'll repeat the same for the oxygen sensor, the pre-cat oxygen sensor.
The rest of them.
All right, now that that's tight, we'll do the same on the other side for the rest of the oxygen sensors. So now we want to take care of our oxygen sensor wires. You can see how this one was originally placed into this holding bracket right there. We're going to remove it from there, give a little bit of slack on the line, and this time we're going to put our ground strap back in. I'll tighten that off camera. We're going to take our zip ties and just tie off to the ground wire. Pull off a little bit. Don't stress these wires too much. You want it to have a little bit of wiggle room and a little play. You mainly want to make sure that this wire is not going to blow around in the breeze and hit your steering shaft or your very hot catalytic converters. So with that like that, we're pretty safe. All right, I'll torque this, and then we're gonna do the same on the other side. So now our last step, we're gonna put this aluminum pan back in place, kind of the reverse of the removal. We're gonna pull these plastic pans down, place it up there, and then slip it forward over top of this plastic. We're gonna start with these two 13mm nut bolts. Just to hold it in place. We're gonna leave everything loose until we plug everything in. You might want to take the time. You can see the rust on these bolts. I'll bring them in from the frame rail. So it's a good idea while you have them out to put some anti-seize on them. Again, you don't need to kill them, just one side. And that'll prevent problems in the future the next time you have to have that pan down. So we're gonna get our 17 mil. We'll run up, and again, just hand tight. Well, not even hand tight, just in there enough that it hangs until they're all in. All right. Now we're going to go with these 18mm sockets or bolts. They go up in these corners. These are also a good idea. Put a little bit of anti-seize on them. All right, now that they're kind of all in place, we can start snugging them up. Again, never do the final torque is what the gun puts it on. Do a little bit by hand. And we can focus back on these 17. All right, now's a good time to locate and make sure that these plastic panel pieces are in place. And then we can go and shoot these 10mm into the pan. And again, while we have it all apart, anti-seize it.
I'm rolling now.
Okay. We're gonna get our 10mm. And these don't need a crazy amount of time. They're just there to hold the plastic in place. Okay, our last step are these plastic Christmas tree clips, and they go into the side of the plastic. You want to get a shot. Just make sure they're pressed in. On both sides, you're gonna have to hold the back while you push. You'll hear them clip in place. Repeat the same on the other side, and you're all done.